Hi, welcome to Frontiers, where we're talking about how technology, innovation, corporate sustainability, and finance intersect to help sustainability strategy come to life. I'm Kat Hunt, and today I am joined by an incredible leader in the sustainability space, Kristen Siemen. Kristen was at General Motors for 3 decades and more recently served as the Chief Sustainability Officer and Vice President of Global Facilities. She is now advising on multiple boards, helping companies with corporate strategy, governance, risk, technology, and transformation. Today, we're going to be covering how Kristen went from a career in engineering to leading sustainability at one of the world's largest companies, and some of the initiatives that she spearheaded and how she financed them. Kristen, it's lovely to have you here. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to start with this journey you took from, I think what you said, 27 years in engineering, product engineering, to getting tapped for this dual role of CSO and VP of global facilities, which I think is a lot of people's dream, is just to be tapped on the shoulder for something like that.
Yeah, it was a dream, although there were many days that I had to remind myself of that. Um, no, it really was a fantastic opportunity. But I mean, honestly, I literally got a phone call and was asked to take on the role. And my first response was, why me? I know very little about sustainability, and I certainly don't know anything about facilities or construction. And the response I got was, well, it's not the first time we asked you to take on something that you weren't the expert, which was very true. But in this space, I think it really became an advantage. I had actually worked with my predecessor on some of the big goals that GM had set at the time. And so I had done a lot of work on the product side related to our transition to EVs and some of our carbon neutral goals, et cetera. And so coming out of the business and then into sustainability, it really gave me a perspective of what it took to really put these initiatives in place and to meet my peers where they were at and understanding maybe what it took to develop a new material or to make changes in our manufacturing facilities. And so while I didn't have the expertise on sustainability or reporting, and as I said at the time, I had to learn the alphabet soup of all of the
Mhm.
frameworks and everything else, but I did have business knowledge that enabled me to communicate in the right language and really help transition and accelerate the things that we were trying to do. So it turned out to be quite an advantage, but it was an odd transition in.
And I know there was kind of this dichotomy, it sounds like, between you having quite a good amount of business knowledge and understanding the technical heart of the company. But then also, I know you shared that you didn't have as much experience or any in facilities, I believe. So maybe starting with kind of where you did have deep expertise, how did that expertise really turn out to be effective for you in the sustainability role?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about what needs to happen from a sustainability standpoint, and particularly in a very large company, the automotive industry is quite complex. But to be able to talk to the product engineering team about new materials or our creative design team and work with them on the process, understanding that it was going to take a number of years to put it into production, also understanding that these things had to be done in a manner that cost wasn't an issue. And
Mhm.
so we really needed to look for win-wins. And I think there's a lot of conversation now about integrating sustainability into the business. But at the time, the momentum was there to sustainability was the hot topic. I used to joke that it was everything from commercials to Hallmark movies. You would turn and listen, and everybody was talking about sustainability or environmental projects. But I think really taking a step back and what you're seeing now and talked about more is really how do you integrate it into the business? My goal was always that we would talk about sustainability and think about sustainability in the company like we thought about safety and quality. Certainly, there was a dedicated team that was responsible for strategy and implementation, but at the end of the day, it was everybody's job. And so, whether it be our plant facilities and the efficiencies or energy savings projects that we wanted to implement there, product engineering, materials, or even thinking about design strategy. Traditionally, we spent a lot of time designing for manufacturing or designing for serviceability. Now we need to think about how do you design for disassembly or recyclability, and really it has to be built in early. It's not something you can add on at the end. And then there's a number of other things with sustainability, whether it be resiliency and how we manage our supply chain. All of those practices or initiatives are really just good business at the end of the day. So being able to translate between the two of both, yes, we're doing things from an environmental standpoint and a good stewardship, but it's also very good for the business.
Did you feel because you're able to bring those business cases over and because of your background that the sustainability initiatives were taken more seriously while you were there as well?
I came with a level of credibility, right? A lot of my peers were people I had worked with for many years, and I could speak the language. I understood what they needed to do. One of the times I would talk about is walking into a plant and meeting with a plant manager. The plant manager, the last thing they want is somebody from corporate to come in with some new initiative, right? I mean, their main focus is, of course, safety and quality, but it's getting product out the door. I went in there and had the conversation with them around the way I would say it is I'm not asking you to do anything your parents didn't teach you. Turn off the lights, quit running the water, and shut the doors and don't let all the air out of the facility. And if we just do that, we save energy. We also reduce carbon. But at the end of the day, it's just good business practices. It's about efficiency and really looking for those, matters of continuous improvement. It's one of the things I think that engineering taught me and enabled me to have that perspective in the role, whether it be the sustainability role or the facilities role. Engineers are trained to think. We come with a level of curiosity and
Mhm.
intuition. And so it's not necessarily that you were trained on this specific topic, but you have an approach and a mindset of how you handle situations or
Yeah.
handle issues.
You shared a great example about kind of this mindset shift and how to think about how teams were incentivized with energy consumption. Can you share that example of the initiative?
Yeah, one of the things that we found early on was the way we were managing energy budgets was we didn't factor in energy rates. And so when we divvied out budget to our facilities, the rate would fluctuate through the year. And so what we would find is as the rates went up, it was a good reason why the energy budget wasn't met. But as the rates went down, we weren't necessarily seeing energy savings. There was just the advantage that the rate went down. So, to really drive behavioral change, we changed the way we did budgets and we started budgeting based on usage. And so we held the rate piece of it at a corporate level, and each plant was allocated a certain amount of energy to use. So, the incentive to save and drive efficiency was flipped. And we really started to see a behavioral change based on that. We also made the data very visible, and a little friendly competition amongst facilities never hurts either. And so, whether it be trying to see how low a certain facility could go from a shutdown procedure, so when they weren't running, what's the lowest energy usage you could get to comparing a plant that was maybe running 2 shifts versus 3 shifts and really driving that comparison factor helped us find where there were more opportunities. And again, it became a win-win. As they saved energy, the budget improved, but was also overall driving efficiencies.
And we should say that now that sounds obvious of looking at consumption, but at the time, most companies were trying to figure out how to understand their consumption.
Yeah, and I think in reality, a lot of these things that we talk about, they are simple. We all want, even in engineering or innovation or product development, you want that next big thing, right? You want to invent the iPhone or you want to go fully autonomous tomorrow. But what the reality is all of those things are built over time. They're small, continuous improvements that ultimately lead. It's very rare that you have that real moonshot kind of innovational leap. I used to tell my team, how many points can we put on the board today? Right? What can we do? What waste can we eliminate? Can we save a little bit of water? All of those add up in the end to success.
So, thinking now about the beginner's mindset that you mentioned already and kind of going to the facilities part of your role, I'm curious how that tension kind of worked itself out in terms of having so much knowledge in some aspects of the business and then needing to be able to go in and build that credibility in areas that were brand new.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where leadership comes into play, right? And I always say that leadership is transferable and the leader doesn't need to be the expert. In some cases, sometimes I think it's better if you're not the expert because you're able to ask the simple questions that sometimes are things that we've done for so long because that's the way we always did it. And you don't necessarily think outside the box and ask why or to have that sense of curiosity or intuition. And so while I wasn't necessarily going to be the one to design the trust structure for our new facility, I could help with planning, right? What does our workload look like? How do we how do we move from one stage to the next? Are we operating in a development cycle versus just being the phone call of the day and operating like on a work ticket type of perspective? And so I think looking at processes or procedures and you come in with a different mindset, it really enables the team to kind of take a step back and then really make a leap forward. It drives, I think, more conversation versus just going out and executing the way you've always done it.
I'm sure teams found that very empowering too. You mentioned the energy treasure hunts when we spoke a bit ago, and it's making me think you're maybe into gamification because you also talked about kind of a competitive aspect of the energy usage. Can you describe the energy treasure hunts? Because that was a really cool example of kind of bringing cross functional expertise together.
So what we would do is literally get a cross-functional group of people together, sometimes folks that had never even been in a plant or facility, sometimes suppliers, and we would literally go walk around the plant and look for opportunities for energy savings. It may be compressed air leaks, lights that were left on, equipment that wasn't shut down properly, or even preventative maintenance were things that caused things to run inefficiently. And we took that mindset and would identify these items as part of the treasure hunt. And then we would share it across facilities. We even did it with suppliers and would do it in their facilities and try and drive the behavior of looking for these nuggets of opportunity. And that cross functional thinking, again, somebody coming in and looking at it that doesn't see it every day really brought things to light.
And I'm sure helped you ask questions of where else do we need to be thinking of this to scale? It's more systems thinking.
Correct.
I love the way you think about small incremental change, but it needs to be paired with some of these larger eye towards the future of innovation at times. So I'd love to discuss both the offshore wind investment and then the alternative leather. Both are really interesting from different vantage points of the business. So starting with wind, what kind of brought that investment to be? It was wind catching systems that ultimately was invested in from the venture arm. What brought that investment idea forward? And then what were the challenges in getting agreement?
Yeah, I mean, so GM has a great ventures team that is always out looking for new innovations, new partners, new way of doing business. This one actually came through a member of my team who was heavily involved in the energy space. And GM had set a big renewable energy goal. And one of the things that came to light was that energy was going to continue to evolve, right? And land was becoming a challenge for solar farms. And one of the things that caught our attention was this wind catching systems. And it's basically an offshore wind turbine. And instead of having a single turbine that we're all used to seeing, it's an array of turbines. And so it can produce much more energy in much less real estate on the ocean floor. It can also be further out from land. And so there's not as many site issues and that type of things. But certainly not a standard type of investment that General Motors would make. We don't make turbines or we don't produce solar farms. We have a fantastic board that makes the decisions on what investments are made. And it took a lot of discussion over why it was important for GM to invest in this. And it really came down to we needed to be part of the solution for energy going forward and how we were going to be able to produce enough green energy everywhere. And not only having the scope and scale of GM behind a company like this, but also the mindset or the knowledge that we could bring to help. That's part of the
Mhm.
ventures plan is to always make sure that we have something to offer as well. It's not just an investment, right? But there's some knowledge. And so certainly our supply chain, whether it be from steel or our knowledge around analysis and motors and those type of things. And so it really was a win-win, but it was very unique and was exciting to see it really come to fruition. On the opposite side, the alternative leather materials, clearly that's where we standardly do investments, whether it be in new battery technology or new ways of doing business. The leather alternative, what was really exciting about that one was our creative design team was in from the very beginning. And our creative design team is the one who makes fabric and color selections for the vehicles. And I mean, Your car says something about who you are, and when you sit in that seat, you want it to feel amazing. And so we were partnered very, very early with our materials team that certifies materials, with the creative design, with the engineering team, and my sustainability team to really develop this company and develop the material. And it ultimately ended up on one of our show cars, which was pretty exciting to see it in the real world and showing what's capable of. In fact, in many cases, when you do a blind test, the alternative leather even feels nicer than real leather.
And that's the cool thing. It sounds like you knew that there was skepticism, I think, with anything that's an
Right.
alternative to an animal product, whether it's food or a material. People are immediately like, "Nah, I need my premium." Uh,
Yes.
and so doing a blind test was probably such a thrilling experience to see the results there.
Absolutely. To your point, we all have perceptions or preconceived opinions, right? And we
Mhm.
assume the customer wants leather. But the reality is they want a premium material. They want something that feels nice, lasts, is durable, soft, cool, not too hot, all of those things. And so when it comes to new innovations, I think we need to really challenge everyone to really think and take a step back. Like you said, not assume that you know what the customer is asking for. It's a little bit, I would say, like the Costco model, right? You don't know you need it until you walk in the store and you see it. And so we've
Yeah.
gotta have that way of being open-minded.
Yeah, totally. Help people know what they need.
Exactly.
And then with the wind catching systems, I'm curious if that also relates to your comment about resiliency and the business case of being able to kind of help the board and the team see that looking outward, having energy security, clean energy security was going to be really vital for the business.
Absolutely. Energy, well, we're all watching energy prices fluctuate significantly right
Yeah.
now. And so having a strategy that involved multiple sources of energy, and you're seeing even more happen now within multiple industries, right? Whether it be some of the new on site battery storage solutions or even some of the small nuclear things that are happening, all of that diversity really just makes you much more resilient to other factors that can come and hit you. And energy supply has gotten a lot of attention lately, and really building that diversity into our portfolio was important.
Because that and the comment about energy consumption, being able to track that data at the consumption level or the usage level was ahead of its time. I mean, now it makes sense. A lot of large corporations are investing in their energy sources, but this was in the early 2020s, which is scary to say because I guess I can officially say that in 2026. That was really looking forward in a way a lot of companies weren't quite yet.
Yeah, I mean, I have to give the team a ton of credit. GM had originally set a goal for renewable energy to be 100% renewable by 2050, and actually were able to pull ahead in the US to be pretty close in 2025, and so almost 25 years ahead of time. So all of that required early engagement. I think that's the challenge when you look at sustainability. A lot of times we talk about ROI and we talk about the return on investment of a project. Very standard, right? We've all heard it in business. And sustainability, I think you often need to think of ROI from a risk of inaction, right? What happens if I don't do this today? What's going to happen 5 years, 10 years down the road? And it's really tough to get people to think that way, but you have to be very creative in business cases and initiatives. And even with the materials, we found really early when we were bringing alternative sustainable materials to our program teams, we had a list. Well, you could guess which ones they picked. They picked all the ones that saved cost. Easy, right?
Yeah.
And so we're like, that didn't work so well. We started looking at it from okay, here's a sustainable material package, right? Some are going to be a little higher and some are going to be a little lower in cost, but the goal was to maintain at zero. And so by doing that, it really changed again the way we approached it. And over time, scale will cause those other prices to go down, but you got to get started. And that's, I think, one of the tough things in this space.
You're reframing risk. In sustainability, we wanna be able to talk about value creation,
Right.
and a lot of what it really is, it's at the heart of both of those things, which is saying, "What is the cost of doing nothing to your business?" And this is the return you're gonna see, but you're also fighting our limited time horizons that we like to focus on.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, not all of these fit within a standard 18-month return, right?
Right.
And so you need to look at it a little bit broader. And honestly, sometimes there were decisions that we shouldn't move forward. And it also needed to be, I think, it's not sustainability at all cost, right? It's how do you integrate it in a way that does the good that you're trying to do from a environmental perspective, but also really how is it creating value? Because at the end of the day, any company only exists if it's profitable. And so we've got to
Right.
find a way to make it a win-win. And sometimes that takes longer, sometimes it takes being more creative. But that's the only way it's really going to last for the long term.
Yeah. So I know we need to start wrapping up. I don't want to. This has been really, really wonderful. Before I get to our last question, you already mentioned this around that incremental kind of daily discipline. How do you think about that with innovation, especially when you mentioned GM being able to achieve energy goals 25 years earlier, right? That had to have been with some really big innovation.
I think the challenge with something like this is you see this mountain in front of you, whether it's I'm going to be carbon neutral by 2040 or we're going to be 100% EV by this date or whatever the initiative is. And it's so hard because that mountain is so high. But I would always tell my team, you can't get to the top if you don't take the first step. We needed to operate like the line was down. In a manufacturing facility, if the line is down, it doesn't matter who you are, what your job is. The job is to get the line running because that's the only way the product gets out the door, which is the only way you make money. It's tough in some of these longer term initiatives or strategies to think like that. But if you don't, it just keeps percolating and you're not making progress. So, whether you found a leak on a compressed air or you signed your first PPA and now you've got 100 more you got to do to get to your full renewable energy, you got to start. You just got to keep moving.
It's just getting the momentum started is the most
Exactly.
important thing. Yeah. Okay, one piece of advice or lesson learned that you'd leave any sustainability practitioners listening with, anyone that's maybe about to step into kind of a new dynamic or role.
Yeah, I would just say be optimistic. It's tough in a job like this that one, the results aren't necessarily visible today. And even with the pushback maybe that sustainability professionals have felt over the past couple of years, I look at it as maybe it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to make your business cases stronger. An opportunity to teach your team how to put a business case together and how to really sell something or find a way to implement it very scrappy. And those are skill sets that are going to carry with you forever. So I just think keeping that optimistic view in place and think of how far you've come. In many cases, we get frustrated with where we're at today and we forget about where we came from.
I love that. I've been thinking a lot lately about how optimism is a choice. So I do think that's in people's control.
I love that.
Well, thank you so much, Kristen. It's really been lovely having you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you.